Highlights of the 2015 South African Rally Championship is proudly presented by the South African Rally Commission and its partners Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, Sasol and Dunlop. The 2015 season so far has seen 4 fierce battles on 4 different battlefields that included stops in KwaZulu-Natal, both the high and the low veld of Mpumalanga and the bushveld of Limpopo. And with 4 down, it's 4 to go. This is the 2015 South African Rally Championship. Just before we get into the second half of what could well be the most prestigious championship in the world of South African motorsport, let's take a look how the first half ended. Former double champion Mark Cronje was quickest out of the blocks by bagging dominant victories in Natal, at the Sasol Rally in Nelspruit and at the first ever Secunda Motor Rally. But current champion Leroy Poulter finally succeeded in breaking Cronje's winning streak with a dominant victory of his own at the Bella Bella Rally just 4 weeks ago. Poulter may have turned the tables, but Cronje is still well in control of the title fight with 60 points to Poulter's 47. Gugu Zulu is still the leading Volkswagen driver on 30 points, but he has Janelle de Villiers in hot pursuit, followed by Henk Lateghan. Those are the standings after 4 of the 9 rounds. And what a way to enter the second half of the season. This is the famous Volkswagen Rally in and around the motoring giant's backyard between Port Elizabeth and Uitenhage in the Eastern Cape. The event is not only a highlight on the calendar for local residents, but also an opportunity for Volkswagen to host the rally fraternity at home.
Our factory is just down the road, where we produce about 120,000 cars per year, and this is where Volkswagen's heart is in South Africa.
The entertainment started early when the usual scrutineering process was turned into a spectacle by Volkswagen, where local rally fans could get up close and personal with their heroes and even got the chance to compete against them in a tyre changing contest, much to the delight of all who attended. But the Volkswagen Rally is also serious business, and probably the event that the drivers want to win most, as a victory on these gravel roads that include a few passes through the fearsome Longmore Forest come with big bragging rights. We may only be halfway into this year's championship, but the title fight has already become a 2-horse race between Mark Cronje and Leroy Poulter, a former double champion and the current defending champion, Ford versus Toyota.
Yeah, I think it's important that we focus on the championship, and that's really what we're doing.
But don't write off Volkswagen's very popular Gugu Zulu, who's having one of his best seasons so far.
Yeah, it comes with its own pressures, but I'm super excited about it. It's a fantastic event, and it would be great to actually be on the podium.
Zulu will have his work cut out though, because Janelle de Villiers will have him firmly in his sights.
Yeah, look, I mean, we'll try and go as good as we can.
On top of that, we'll have 2 more Volkswagens in the hands of Henk Lateghan and Hargen Vekken, gunning for glory, while the talent of young drivers like Ernie van der Walt and Thilo Himmel will gain valuable experience. And watch out for the ever-threatening Japie van Niekerk, who will always be a force to be reckoned with. And it's the Volkswagen Sasol Racing Polo of Hargen Vekken that is waved off first from the Volkswagen Pavilion in Uitenhage, ahead of the Castrol Toyota of Janelle de Villiers. Ernie van der Walt will be 3rd on the road. He'll be followed by Henk Lateghan and the championship contenders Leroy Poulter and Mark Cronje. Japie van Niekerk and Gugu Zulu will keep an eye on proceedings from 7th and 8th on the road respectively. And this is the first battlefield, nearly 20 kilometres of rough and rocky gravel roads near Motherwell. From Motherwell, the crews will tackle another 20 kilometres at Jagtvlakte, only to move on to stage 3, another 16 kilometres test of driving skills in Mission Road. So 3 full stages and 55 kilometres on the trot to get the Volkswagen Rally action underway. Erkan Fekken and Pierre Aris are the first ones to take on the Volkswagen Rally. But their Volkswagen Sassel Racing Polo found the going tough, as it also had to sweep the road, so the former champion was always going to lose time.
It's a very tricky stage. There's a lot of loose rocks on the road.
And from the moment that the Castrol Toyota of Janelle de Villiers and Caroline Swan crossed the flying finish of the first few stages, it was clear that Fekken was in trouble. De Villiers simply romped away and opened up a gap of more than a minute after the opening loop of stages.
It's very, very slippery in there. I mean, it's not easy to keep it on the road.
Due to the absence of Namibian Wilro Dippenaar, who missed the Volkswagen Rally, youngster Ernie van der Walt was promoted to third on the road. The young man had the services of the very experienced co-driver Greg Godrich in the passenger seat of the Vecto Petroleum Yaris, and at this stage of his career, it's all about gaining experience. With Fekken sweeping the road and being off the pace as a result, the local eyes were on the Volkswagen Sassel Racing Polo of Henk Lateghan and Barry White. Driving a Volkswagen on your employer's event means huge pressure, something which Lateghan is used to, but it also means something else: the dreaded sponsor's curse. A punctured tyre and more than 5 minutes lost as a result effectively ruined the young man's event before it really got started.
I got another puncture. I was pushing a bit too hard into the second corner, and then we went wide and hit a rock.
Next up, the Castrol Toyota Yaris of defending champions Leroy Polter and Alvin Coetzee. And 2 minutes after them, it was pedal to the metal for arch rivals and current championship leaders Marc Grenier and Robin Houghton. Everyone just knew that the fight between these two would provide the fireworks, and they did not disappoint. Polter landed the first punch by beating Grenier on stage 1 by a margin of just 5 seconds. But the Ford Performance driver retaliated by winning stage 2 at Jachtvlakte by 3 seconds. So just 2 seconds separated these two going into stage 3. Polter crossed the line in a time of 11 minutes 31 seconds. But it took Grenier a full 17 seconds longer to do the same. So clearly he had a problem.
One of those things, eh?
And with both Fekken and Lateghan having problems of their own, the pressure to perform for Volkswagen was now resting on the shoulders of Gugu Zulu and co-driver Hilton O'Free. It started well, with 2 very competitive stage times on the opening 2 stages, but not even Zulu could prevent the dreaded sponsor's curse from striking once again. They were probably lucky not to have rolled, but the car and Zulu's hopes of a good result both suffered severe damage.
But we hit a jump and unfortunately nosedived hard. We were actually very lucky that we didn't roll the car, but it was a bit of a struggle to keep it on the straight and narrow.
With so much drama so early on, Japie van Niekerk and Gerard Snyman were in the perfect position to capitalise. The new Africa Development's Ford driver set a conservative 7th fastest time on stage 1, but once he found his rhythm, the businessman pounced and drove himself all the way up into 4th position overall.
You know, but overall I think it's okay. I think it's okay.
The Volkswagen Genuine Parts Polo of Namibian Thilo Himmel and co-driver Armand de Toy had a promising start by occupying a top 5 position early on. But the Volkswagen Rally Guards had other ideas and forced him to the sidelines with electrical problems after hitting a rock. After 3 very eventful stages and nearly 60 kilometres of flat-out gravel racing, it's the name of Leroy Polter that tops the standings, nearly 20 seconds ahead of Marc Grenier, who suffered a puncture. Janelle de Villiers is just a further 2 seconds back, ahead of Jaapie van Niekerk. Hosts Volkswagen are having an early nightmare with a Polo of Vecken, the best placed VW in 5th. The first and a well-earned visit to a windy Dunlop Service Park inside the Port Elizabeth Oval Track Raceway on Mission Road. And a chance for Janelle de Villiers to reflect on his current 3rd position.
We just try to keep it clean and we'll see how it goes now, but we'll try and push as hard as we can.
Marc Cronje lost valuable time towards the end of stage 3 with a punctured tyre.
Absolutely, I mean it's not going according to plans yet. We unfortunately punctured in that stage, so.
And after having a problem of his own, Leroy Poulter considered himself lucky to be in the lead.
We got caught out in the beginning and bent the right rear, so we just had to finish the stage like that, so we were very lucky.
Stages 4 and 5 were the exact 2 stages at Jagtvlakte and Motherwell, and were used as stage 2 and 1 earlier in the day, so the crews knew what to expect, except that loose rocks in the road would now pose the biggest threat. And speaking of threats, the biggest threats to the winning aspirations that Marc Cronje and Leroy Poulter may have had were indeed the names of, and you've guessed it, Leroy Poulter and Marc Cronje. When it comes to these two, no margin will ever be a healthy or comfortable one, so Poulter put the hammer down to record a time of 13 minutes, 13 seconds on stage 4.
Yeah, it was very slippery now. I don't know why. We just overshot a lot.
Cronje, on the other hand, knew that he couldn't afford to give away another inch, so he too gave it his all over the rocky 20 kilometres that made up stage 4. His time? 13 minutes, 14 seconds. Cronje is a double champion for a reason and fought hard on stage 5 to reduce the deficit, but this overshoot didn't help and cost him valuable time.
Right 7, left 5.
We had an overshoot, we're just pushing too hard.
And with Poulter claiming another stage victory in the process, the gap between the Castrol Toyota and the Ford Performance Fiesta extended to 37 seconds. Behind the leading duo, Janelle de Villiers and Carolyn Swan made it 2 Castrol Toyotas in the top 3 with an excellent burst of speed that saw them close to within just 1 single second of Cronje's 2nd position.
Well, it was a lot better than the first time, a lot more traction this time around.
And behind de Villiers, Jaapie van Niekerk and Gerard Snyman made it 2 Fiestas in the top 4 by placing his new Africa Developments version in a comfortable 4th place overall, 45 seconds behind 3rd, but more than a minute ahead of the chasing pack. And the chasing pack was led by the Vecto Petroleum Toyota Yaris of Ernie van der Walt and Greg Godrich, in what was the youngsters' first outing on the Volkswagen rally roads behind the wheel of an S2000. It was most definitely not Hergen Vecken's first outing on these roads. In fact, the former double South African champion has won this rally on more than one occasion, but he would not be adding to that list this year as he found himself down the order and in 6th. One could not help but feel the pain in the Volkswagen Sasol racing camp. The rally guards were more than cruel by basically taking away any chance they had of a good result so early on. Both Gugu Zulu and Henk Lategan set very fast and encouraging stage times on these 2 stages, but realistically they had lost too much time earlier in the day for it to even make a difference. Stage 6, or the final stage of the opening day of the Volkswagen Rally, was going to be a mix of grass, gravel and tarmac at the famous Aldo Scribanti racetrack. But with a 6 p.m. kickoff, it would be run in total darkness. Times on a stage like this one are usually fairly close, with little opportunity to really try and beat your opposition, so there's very little to gain. But as it is still fast and dangerous motorsport at its very best, there is a lot to lose. This is Ernie van der Walt and Greg Godrich in the Vecto Petroleum Yaris.
then when I tapped the brake, the car just died, and then we slid off the bank and then rolled.
No such problems for Janelle de Villiers, who set the 5th fastest time of all, just a few seconds slower than a good showing by the Volkswagen of Gugu Zulu and Henk Lateghan, who were 4th and 3rd fastest respectively. And this time, Marc Cronje managed to stop the Leroy Polter steamroller by winning his 2nd stage of the event, but the winning margin of just 1.2 seconds did little to affect the overall leaderboard. And speaking of which, it still shows the name of Leroy Polter at the top of the standings, followed by Marc Cronje, now 35 seconds behind. Janelle de Villiers is only 7 seconds back, ahead of Jaapie van Niekerk and Hargen Vekken, who round out the top 5. And this is what everyone had to wake up to on the final and decisive day of the 2015 Volkswagen Rally. Weather forecasts had predicted heavy rains in the Eastern Cape, and for once, the predictions were spot on. And this is what the teams were facing on day 2. Stage 7 was a 10-kilometre sprint through the Gamtoos Valley at Buffelshoek, to be followed by Stage 8, a 20-kilometre race down the mountain in the fearsome Longmoor Forest, before returning to Mission Road for another spectacle near the PE Oval track. Despite the torrential rain and testing conditions, questions had to be answered. Could Polter stay out in front, or would Cronje be able to chase him down?
Especially in this type of condition, anything can happen. It's a little bit of a lottery.
It is pretty much a lottery at the moment, so we'll have to wait and see if the weather calms down.
It was Leroy Polter and Albin Coetzee who got things underway on day 2 behind the wheel of their Castrol Toyota Yaris. And exactly 2 minutes later, Marc Cronje and Robin Houghton set off in their quest to chase Polter down. And it's Polter who took the stage win by a mere 2 seconds from Cronje, with the 3rd place pairing of Janelle de Villiers and Caroline Swan cementing their overall position by matching Cronje's time through the Gamtoos Valley down to the last 1/10 of a second. But this is where many people felt the rally would be won or lost, deep in the heart of the Longmoor Forest. Behind the leading duo, the pattern continued with Janelle de Villiers setting the 3rd quickest time.
Pretty happy. I think we did a reasonable stage, and let's see how it goes.
The Longmoor Forest provided the opportunity that Marc Cronje was waiting for. He's won many stages and rallies here, so the man knows his way around these mountains. A perfect run by Cronje and a less than perfect one by Polter, and the latter's lead was slashed by a full 11 seconds. Behind the leading trio, chances were in favour of disaster more than triumph. So the rest of the field used their common sense in order to survive the tough conditions rather than risking retirement. Jaapie van Niekerk carefully managed his 4th position overall by basically maintaining his more than a minute advantage over the Volkswagen Sasol Racing Polo of Hargen Vekken. Vekken in turn had a more than 2-minute lead over his Volkswagen teammate Gugu Zulu, while Zulu was in no real danger of getting caught by the 3rd of the Volkswagen Sasol Racing Polos in the hands of Henk Lateghan. So, the Volkswagen team enjoyed a safe and solid start to the final day of their event in very tricky conditions. Teams still had to survive stage 9 before reaching the service park, but by now it had become ridiculous. The heavens opened and the bucketing rain completely flooded the entire area, including the service park. And through all of this, Janelle de Villiers emerged as the winner of stage 9, beating the Ford of Marc Cronje by 2 seconds, but more importantly for the rally leaders, Leroy Polter only gave away 0.4 of a second, so status quo at the top of the leaderboard. Polter lost a little time so far on day 2, but still had a 26-second advantage over Cronje. De Villiers would simply not go away and maintained his 3rd position over Jaapie van Niekerk and Hargen Vekken. The rally gods clearly wanted to rain on Volkswagen's parade, as the very worst of the Eastern Cape weather had turned the Volkswagen Rally into more than just a mud bath. But rain or shine, Leroy Polter and Marc Cronje not only had to survive the wet conditions, but also had to formulate strategies for the remaining stages.
Yeah, I think we've got the car for it. It's definitely going to be tricky out there, but we got the car in those stages, so I'm looking forward to pushing and see where we're going to get to.
It's very fast in a lot of places. It's a bit of sink time at the end, so very tricky, and you've got to also look after the car for you know, no punctures, because otherwise you lose a lot of time.
The Volkswagen Rally was nearing its end, and behind the front runners it literally turned out to be a war zone for the young warriors in Super 1600 class, which was eventually won by Paul Franken and Henry Kern in the Manitou Group Polo, while Piet Bacchus and Sean Visser were well on their way to claim victory in the NRC4 class for older specification S2000s behind the wheel of their BDH Motorsport prepared accident guru Toyota Auris. PPC Ultimate, or Stage 10 of the Volkswagen Rally, at a full 48 kilometers in length, the mother of all stages, and not only as far as the Volkswagen Rally is concerned, but for the entire championship. To make it even worse, it's 48 kilometers of flooded, muddy roads in the heart of the Longmoor Forest. And since the news came that the two last stages were cancelled due to conditions, Stage 10 would also decide the outcome of the event. After running into double trouble and bad luck so early on in the event, their home rally was always going to be an uphill struggle for the Volkswagen Sasol Racing squad. The best that Henk Latergang could hope for was a 6th position overall, but it came at the expense of his teammate Gugu Zulu. Zulu was ahead going into the last stage, but Latergang overtook him on the 48 kilometers of Stage 10 to snatch 6th. And 5th overall was a bitter pill to swallow for Hergen Vekken, who simply did not have the speed inside his Polo to fight with the leaders. But Vekken is a hardened competitor who will dig deep to make a comeback. And speaking of digging deep, what a good run by the new Africa Developments Ford team of Japie van Niekerk and Gerard Snyman, who kept their noses clean and out of trouble to survive one of the toughest Volkswagen rallies yet, to claim an excellent 4th position overall.
Yeah, we did some load shedding. The bumper came over the bonnet and then over the windscreen, which is fine. We don't need a bumper.
And what about the top 3, or the coveted podium positions? We knew who they were, but in what order would they finish, if they even managed to reach the finish? Well, more than 30 minutes after starting the last stage, Janelle de Villiers gave the answer when his Castrol Yaris reached the end of probably the toughest stage South African rallying has seen in many years.
Really took it easy, just make sure we got to the finish, because the gap to the guy behind us was quite big.
Marc Fournier had a 26-second deficit to Leroy Poulter. 26 seconds would normally be out of anyone's reach, but this is Marc Fournier we're talking about, and he had 47 kilometers in which to do it.
Left for him, into right one, and next right two.
But Fournier's rival is none other than Leroy Poulter. These two have been at each other's throats all season, and the Longmoor Forest would prove to be no different. As overnight leaders, Poulter's Yaris was the first car to tackle the 48 kilometers of PPC Ultimate, and the first to emerge from the Longmoor Forest in a time of 29 minutes 21 seconds. Was it enough for victory?
I don't know, it's very difficult to say.
Fournier therefore needed to stop the clock on 28 minutes and 52 seconds, but it didn't. It stopped on virtually the same time as Poulter. A difference of just 7/10 of a second over 48 kilometers served as a good indication of just how tough the fight was between these two. But victory to Leroy Poulter, and second place to Marc Fournier. With a cancellation of stages 11 and 12, the standings at the end of the tough stage 10 became final, and it's Leroy Poulter who claimed his 2nd victory of the season ahead of rival Marc Fournier. De Villiers took 3rd ahead of Japie van Niekerk and Hergen Vekken. Janelle de Villiers may have seen his fair share of champagne spraying over the years, but he didn't mind doing it once more.
I think from our point of view it was a good rally. We had good pace throughout the event.
Marc Fournier was forced to settle for 2nd, but he's still leading the overall championship.
Yeah, it is. I think it's going to be good for the sport, so Leroy's really coming on strong towards the end. But we'll have to dig deep, and I think we will.
And on the subject of the championship, Leroy Poulter's second victory in as many events means the title fight is on.
Yeah, for sure. This weekend was another turning point for us, good for the championship. Although Mark kept us honest the whole way, I must be honest, he drove well.
Just 3 more rounds remain in the 2015 South African Rally Championship, the 3 rounds that will determine who the overall champion will be. The next stop is on the Highveld for the Cullinan Rally near the historic diamond mining town just east of Pretoria on the 14th and 15th of August. Highlights of Round 5 of the South African Rally Championship was proudly presented by the South African Rally Commission and its partners Toyota, Volkswagen, Ford, Sasol and Dunlop.